Hi, I'm Devin from Careerified. In honor of Halloween this week, I thought we could talk about something scary. Well, maybe it's only scary for certain people, but if you have a child who is headed to post-secondary education in the next few years, you may or may not know this. Chances are this first credential won't be the only one. Oh, I wish I had lightning effects. That'd be cool. Just pretend it happened. Okay, so chances are your child's education will not end with one credential. This may not be that surprising for a lot of people, and hopefully it isn't the first time you've heard this, but times have changed, certainly. Depending on which resource you reference, it may be that your child can expect to have anywhere from 3 to 7 careers in their lifetime. And when I say careers, I mean things that are very different than the previous thing that they just did. Really, given today's technology, you'll find that a lot of people can have more than one career simultaneously. So, for example, you may have somebody who is, an office administrator, say. And then on the side, they also do freelance work in maybe something like graphic design or website design or something like that. And they offer their services through a website known as Fiverr or any other freelance websites out there. So that is something to be aware of, definitely, and that is one thing that's impacting this trend. So what's that about? In my experience, and by that I mean not just my career, but the hundreds of students I've worked with over the years, in my experience, people change careers really for a lot of different reasons, but today's students are impacted by a couple of things in particular. One is something that's a little bit more age-old, I guess, and that is when it comes to career and education decision-making, you very often don't know what won't work until it doesn't work. It's very experiential based, and it can happen at any different stages. So you may have a kid who hit all the prerequisites, who took all the assessments, who is really excited about whatever subject they choose. Let's say they want to go study sociology at university. They're super pumped about that. And then they walk into the first year class with 800 other students in it. And they've never been in a lecture with 800 students in it. You don't know how you're going to handle being in a lecture with 800 people until you're in a lecture with 800 people. Or maybe a little further down the road, right? There may be certain personality types that you have experienced yourself were never really an issue until you had to deal with them on a work team, right? Maybe you didn't know that a micromanager would be a problem as a boss because you've never had them as a boss before. They might have been a friend, but it didn't bother you because it didn't affect you. Or there might be other personality types that you clash with at work. So those are things where you just don't know until you do. And that can't really be avoided. It can only be experienced. Lastly, what your kids are up against is something of a self-perpetuating cycle of a few different elements. So you have people staying in individual workplaces for shorter amounts of time. And last I looked this up, it was something like 68% of people leave a job or leave an organization within 6 years of starting there. That's a pretty high number. So in that sort of situation, the employer is going to look at that and say, well, how much do I want to invest in people if they're not going to stay here longer than 5 or 6 years? So what all of this means is organizations are taking on less responsibility for providing career development tools to their employees. So if you were to look back, 30, 40, 50 years ago, and somebody started with an organization, you might be primed to move into management, or you might be shoulder tapped to go into this particular department. You will not see that as much anymore, because if I need somebody for a particular department, I can just hop on the internet and find somebody who already has that skill set. I don't have to put the time into investing in somebody to maybe get it to pay off 4 or 5 or 10 years from now. So for that reason, more employees and future employees, your kids, are going to have to take responsibility for their own upskilling. So for students who complete maybe an undergraduate degree, maybe that means a second degree or a graduate credential. For those who do a diploma, maybe it means a graduate certificate, another diploma, a apprenticeship training, you name it. This can take many different forms. Sometimes it might be a formal credential that, yes, you go to an institution to do. Sometimes it's more like weekend workshops or certification programs. As another twist throwing into this, a lot of post-secondary institutions are trying to adjust their programs to be able to attract these types of people. So you will often find now that a lot of students in post-secondary education are what's known as non-direct, meaning they don't come directly from high school. And so a lot of programs as well are being delivered more flexibly. It's more likely that you're going to find something available to take part-time, to take online. You may be able to take satellite classes, I should say, at a satellite campus near you, as opposed to having to travel 3 or 4 or 5 hours away or move to a new city in order to take part in that program. So if you have a kid who's going into post-secondary in the next few years, now is the time to start having those discussions of, this isn't going to be the last kick at the can, kid. There's going to be a lot more in your future. And it's best to lay the groundwork early for the idea of continuous learning. The other thing I think is really important here is to accept that you will not know the outcome and make the best decision you can. And that's really true for anything, right? All you can ever do is do the best that you can with what you have available to you at the time. And we're not very good at that as humans. We want a step-by-step process. We want to know the pros and cons. We want to make the lists to figure out what makes the most sense. You aren't always going to know the factors at play, and that's okay. So it's accepting that you're going to have to just decide what to do based on what makes sense today and stay open to what opportunities become available over time. That's this week's tip. Don't be scared, but you're probably going to pursue more than one credential if you're in high school right now. And if you're a parent of a high school student, prepare your brain for that and prepare your kid for that. We'll see you next week here in the living room. Have a good one.